Hello, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be doing my November wrap up. So for the past couple months, I've been really focusing on finishing my TBR out, trying to read everything that I own, and this month was no exception. I continued that. And so while I didn't read a lot, I did get to read a few big books off my TBR and get some projects out of the way. So without further ado, let's get into those reads, first starting off with the manga. I continued reading Kami-sama Kiss. I read volume 10. I meant to read more of this month, but I just didn't quite get to it. But we're finally getting into an arc I've been much anticipating, which is the Tengu arc. And so I'm really excited to get back into this in December. But Kami-sama Kiss, it's a nostalgic paranormal shoujo series about a young girl who becomes a kami, or a god of a small temple, and kind of the spirits that she encounters. And then the other manga that I read was Apothecary Diaries volume 10. This is the new volume that came out. I've been just so enjoying this series this year. I think I started reading this series at the end of December last year or the beginning of January. And from there it was an instant had to collect, had to read series. And so I just have been loving my read of this. Also, the anime just started and I've really been loving that as well. Highly recommend this series. Highly recommend you at least check out the anime. It's about a young girl who is from the poor district, the red light district. One day she gets captured and kind of bartered away to be a servant in the inner palace where all of the beautiful maidens of the emperor live. And from there her apothecary abilities attracts the interest of one of the people working there who is disguised as a eunuch. And from there they kind of go on these murder mystery type adventures. There is an underplot existing, but it is a lot of vignettes, but it just works really well. She is such a fun character. I absolutely love her. Highly recommend this series. And so now we can get into the novels that I read. So the first novel I read was Paris Dalincourt is About to Crumble. This is an adult romance novel, and it's the second book in this kind of companion series. And this is an adult romance series that uses a version of a Great British Bake Off type competition as the setting. And I am going to talk about more of this book in a separate video that I had planned, but to just get into a little bit of it here, this is an adult romance, but a lot of people have complained that this does not feel like a romance. It feels much more like a contemporary coming of age story, and I agree with that, but that's also why I liked it. Basically, our main character, Paris, is kind of a big disaster. He is attempting to get his degree, but he struggles so much with social anxiety and just interacting with people, and just always seems to be on the verge of a panic attack. And his roommate and only friend kind of convinces him to join Bake Expectations, which is the baking competition, as a way to kind of improve his confidence, hopefully, but of course that is not going as planned. There is a lot of spiraling, there's a lot of mental health stuff in here. It's a lot of Paris discovering himself, discovering his confidence, learning, growing, making a lot of mistakes. It is completely and super messy, which I am discovering is kind of my jam with adult romance, especially queer adult romance. I like that coming of age kind of feel. I like the characters making mistakes, being messy, coming into themselves, but be warned, there is some pretty intense panic attack, anxiety representation in here. But the romance is very cute, and it is a part of the book. Basically, he is falling in love with one of the other competitors, and there is some back and forth as they try to navigate this new relationship, this new interest in each other. Very cute, very nice. The only thing I will say is that Paris is a student. I believe this is happening during a summer break, and it does allude to it. It does talk about his degree a little bit, but I would have liked a little bit more about what Paris is doing for his classes, what he's doing for his thesis, just get a little bit more of what he's hoping to do in life as he gets this degree. I think I was surprised when I figured out that he was a college age student and that university just didn't seem super important to him besides being a background thing he did once or twice. Maybe this is an American thing, but college is kind of your whole life, and being a university student I feel is very different than being an established adult. And so I would have liked that to play a little bit more into the story. I just would have liked more of his hobbies, what is happening in his day-to-day life, just so that I could get a little bit more of him. He's all over this mess, it really is a story about him, so that's why I would have liked a little bit more of the background details. But overall, this was really up my alley. I really enjoyed it, really highly recommend, and I can't wait to talk about it more in another video. And then the last book, yes, the only other book I read this month, it will make sense sense in a minute. That is going to be Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And holy heck, this is a chunky book. Jesus Christ. So yes, Priory of the Orange Tree took about 2.5 weeks for me to read, so this was really my November right here. And I will say, after I read it, I was kind of burnt out. I didn't want to read much. I've been kind of in a slump, and this did not help. But let's get into Priory of the Orange Tree. This is an adult fantasy standalone-ish novel. Basically, it is a contained story. There is now a prequel out, but this is like its own contained fantasy story. It is multiple perspectives. We are following a couple different characters. And the main kind of conflict in this fantasy world is that there is the eastern side and the western side who are opposed to each other. They have some similar religions, some similar beliefs, but one side is very pro-dragon, one side is very anti-dragon, and so even though there's this big bad other creature that is intent on destroying them, and it seems like that creature is starting to wake up, the two other sides, you know, cannot get together and find a compromise, and instead are kind of in conflict with each other. The main characters that you see are a guard type character. Basically, she is like a handmaiden to this queen, but she's kind of acting as a secret protector, and she is also a magic user, which is forbidden in this country. We are getting an alchemist who is trying to discover how to live forever and is also dealing with a lot of emotional stuff from his past. We also have a young man who is being exiled from the queendom section as kind of like this weird political move to get him out of the way so that the queen can like marry someone else. And in his exile, he's like encountering these other mysterious like tasks and stuff. And then we also have a young woman who is learning to be a dragon rider, and it's her where the story starts, where on her day before she is going to be announced as a dragon rider, she encounters a mysterious young man on a beach. She's not really supposed to be there, and he is definitely not supposed to be there because he is from this other country. And because she hides this young man and tries to like erase all evidence that she was there, a lot of things start to spiral out. I have mixed feelings about this book. Like, the characters I really liked. There's like a princess guard trope, a sapphic relationship between a princess and a guard. That's very much my jam. That's kind of why I got interested in the book to begin with. The characters themselves, unique, diverse, interesting. They have full fleshed out lives and different interests. I felt like the multiple perspectives worked fairly well. Like, in some instances, like I could have used different perspectives or more, but overall I felt like the characters we had were good choices. They were well executed. They were interesting characters. I thought the setting, the world, the magic, just all the world building was really interesting. Again, it felt like a very complex, fleshed out world that the author was really interested in exploring. I would say world building was like the big factor of this. And if you're someone like me that likes court politics, that likes that kind of world building, that likes legends and magic, that works really well. And once it gets started, there is a plot. It's court intrigue, there are fight scenes, there are dragons, obviously. There's a lot of different moving parts, a lot of learning. And I would say that the main kind of story that this is portraying, this is the kind of story beat where you're like given the religion and the mythology of these two different lands who hate each other, kind of seeing where they differ in their religions, and then it's them going through the plot, and it's mostly a story about discovering what is the real truth behind these legends and mythology, kind of breaking it down and discovering the big bad in this mythology religion. And that is a story kind of type that I like. I like discovery. I like when things kind of unravel and you're learning the truth about things. That's especially why I love N.K. Jemisin's The Broken Earth trilogy. But while I like the character, while I like the plot, while I liked those elements and the kind of story that this wanted to tell, I didn't love the execution. This book, it's very large. I wouldn't say the writing is dense necessarily. Like, the story is dense, but like I wouldn't say it was hard to read necessarily. There was just something that made it very hard to slog through. Just the way the information was given to us, it was overwhelming in some respects. And like, I like that there's so much world, I like that there's so many things to tell us, but I just don't think the execution of those beats really worked for me personally. Like I said, this is a story about unraveling the truth, discovering history behind the legends, but I don't feel like we got a very clear, explicit, one paragraph kind of explanation of the religion right off the bat. Instead, we were getting all these elements kind of thrown at us, all these different things, and so it became really difficult to parse course, it gave us great vibes for kind of how these religions and societies worked and felt, but I didn't feel like I really understood the kind of baseline mythology. And because of that, when we were slowly starting to unravel things, it just felt like I was not on solid footing to really see where these two religions differed, where the kind of truth lied, how those truths were going to really change everything. It just felt like we got 200 pages of so much information with so little plot moving forward. And then all of a sudden, all this plot was happening, but I didn't feel like I had the information to really get a good grip of how things were changing and evolving because of new truths. So that just made the book really, really dense and kind of, in some respects, agonizing to read. The other thing about the information and how it was delivered is that it was continuous. Like, we were never stopping getting all this information, which is great. I like that there's so much of this world to explore. At a certain point, it has to stop. Because, like, by the time we had discovered the truth, what was really going on, our characters were still going to new places, we're still discovering new characters, we're still getting new information, and like 100 pages from the end of a giant fantasy novel, I don't feel like I should be getting more world building. I don't feel like I should get more information. I feel like that information should have been laid out from the beginning and, you know, built upon maybe a little bit. I've heard a lot of people say that the pacing wasn't really great in the story, and like I can see why people would think that. For me, it was more the pacing of how information was delivered, because if we got clear explanations of world building in like the first 100 pages, and then we kind of build and expand upon it where we needed to get like the understanding of setting and stuff throughout the rest of the book, I felt like that would have just worked a lot better. Instead, you were just getting always dumped with new information. Even at the last 50 pages of a giant fantasy novel, you want to be invested in the characters and the plot rather than more world building. I didn't love this. I'm giving it like a 2.5. For me, it was just really middle of the road, just like very meh. I liked everything. I liked the characters, the plot, the kind of story that was being told. I just didn't love the execution, and because I didn't like the execution, it made it kind of difficult to read. I know this is a much beloved fantasy novel and I feel so bad, but in the end, it was just middle of the road. It wasn't really for me, which is so sad. But I'm glad I read it, finally finished it, got it off my TBR. Been kind of staring at me since I bought it, a giant weight looking at me, so I'm glad I finished it. And yeah, I'm kind of ready for a break after that one, not gonna lie. And I have been taking a break. I've been reading a ton of fan fiction instead of reading any books, and you know what? I'm very happy with that. It's fine. But yeah, these are all the books that I read in the month of November. I have some exciting plans coming for December. There's stuff to look forward to, but thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.